we're here with Travis Stoker.
Yep.
And you are with?
NF.
NF.
Yep,
Man.
NF.
First off, thanks for having me here,
Yeah,
man.
absolutely.
It's
Thanks
awesome
for
to be
coming
here.
out today.
Man, running sound. This is a beautiful console you have back here. I'm assuming you didn't start off with just doing this. What got you into running sound?
So when I was a kid, I grew up in the church. So I grew up helping, volunteering for my home church, getting involved in whatever way possible. I grew up as a drummer. When I did that, I kind of got drawn to the sound things. I've always loved technology and been very interested by it. So it was kind of another segue into the musical world that I saw. So I got really interested in that, and a guy at the church saw that I was interested and brought me in and started teaching me things, and I learned that way and have just been kind of doing it since. And yeah, still work for churches, still enjoy that part of it. So that's kind of how I got started with getting into it. Lots of local production companies that were nearby that helped support that church. So I got involved with those companies and started interning and just learning, doing whatever I could, just absorbing as much as I could. And I guess that's really kind of where I started and got the interest.
Okay.
And it just kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah.
Very much nerdy about it. So
Yeah.
I drove my parents crazy, like just talking about like, oh, look at this gear,
Yeah.
like looking up stuff on the internet or getting the magazines and stuff like that from like, different sound and lighting magazines and whatnot. So
you're a full-on nerd.
Full-on sound and live production nerd.
Yeah.
So absolutely.
So running sound at a church to being on tour, there's a little bit of a gap there. Tell me about your first tour you went on. Did you you said you do local production companies?
Yeah.
Is that how you got your feet wet with touring
so
world?
actually it was the same thing.
Or you went from church to NF, right?
No,
That was the very first. No.
Yeah, exactly. No, it was actually one of the front of house engineers at the church I had grown up in. He was a touring guy. He played or he still plays with a band called Fozzy. He's had started that band with Chris Jericho, and they were looking for somebody young to bring out on the road, and someone that showed experience but also was willing to learn and build, and someone they could mold and kind of shape, and so I started with them and toured with them roughly 3 or 4 years, kind of on and off, and that's how I first started getting out on the road, doing whatever I could. I was drum teching it first, and did a bit of lighting, did a bit of monitors, went kind of everywhere through that camp, really. So they really, as Rich Ward is the guitar player, he gave me a start with touring, so very thankful for that. So
Shout out to.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so going from that to NF, how'd you get connected with NF?
So fast forward a few years later, I'm still doing a lot of touring with those guys. I started touring with CCM artist Colton Dixon. I was actually doing lighting for him.
And for people who don't know what CCM is?
Christian contemporary music.
Okay.
So started with doing lighting, so I have a lot of background in lighting as well. The drummer for Colton Dixon at the time had moved from that camp over to NF. This was probably 2016, I think. And, we all ended up kind of moving on and doing our other things. I was with Switchfoot doing lighting for them for about a year and a half. And I got the call from Rhett, who was the prior drummer. He had said, hey, we're looking for somebody to join our team. And I hopped in with NF doing lighting when I was first with them in 2017.
Really?
So I did a tour of lighting, but it was funny because Switchfoot and NF were doing some of the same festivals.
Okay.
So we ended up crossing paths, and they NF didn't have a sound guy for those festivals, and they knew me. I had been doing T-Pain as well for a little bit, so in between all of Colton Dixon and Switchfoot, I'd been with T-Pain for like a year and a half, and I'd been going on and off with front of house, on and off with lighting. It's kind of jumping back and forth. So eventually, I got the call to hop over to front of house after doing a tour with lighting with NF, and it was really small then. We were one bus, one trailer, so everything fit in the trailer, and it was like just jam-pack it in there. So we were doing 500-seat clubs and small theaters and stuff like that. So once I got the call to do front of house, I was just like, this is where I want to be. I enjoy lighting, but the musician in me really enjoys mixing audio. So that's kind of where it progressed, and how I got connected with this camp was through that drummer.
So NF, how many inputs are you running?
So currently we are at 72 inputs.
How many of those are redundant?
A lot of those are redundant. 25 are redundant.
70 of them.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're about 30 inputs on drums. That includes, some talkbacks and stuff like that. And
30 inputs. That's a lot of inputs.
Yes.
Break that down for me. How does that work?
Yeah, we have multiple mics on the kicks, or on the kick drum. We have multiple mics on our snare one. We have 2 top mics that we use, and I kind of blend those together. Snare top, bottom on each of the 3 snares. We have hi-hats, 4 toms, a gong drum, and then we have some close mics on cymbal stacks and a couple splash cymbals.
Okay.
So, and then overheads, of course.
Well, let me ask you this. I walking by, I saw the stage. You have some pretty big side fills up there.
Yes.
It's a lot of mics on the drums. How do you mitigate that noise, specifically coming in through drums and coming in through microphones? How do you mitigate that?
So what I do is we actually use triggers on all of the toms and the kick drum. And what we do is we sidechain these triggers into our gates on the channel, so it just comes in like a normal channel on the console, and we just tell the gate on the actual mic channels to look at the input for the triggers. And what it does is it sidechains that, and it looks at that signal to open up from the trigger, to open up the mic, the gate on the mic for those toms and kick, and it really cleans up all the low end, because we have a lot of low end energy on this show. Just from the side fill subs and the front of house system as well. There's a lot of energy that comes off the backside of that.
I was going to say, even just walk me through your system here right now. You have.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of energy coming out there.
So yes, system this is the 12th iteration of this L-acoustic system as far as the design goes.
Okay.
We started looking at the system last year when we started putting this tour together, and things changed since then, and this amazing ticket sales went really well, so we opened up more of the arenas and even some of the corners. So what we have now, what we ended up with is L-acoustics K1 over K2. So it's 14. A normal day is 14 K1 over 4 K2. So it's 18 in the main, 18 boxes in the mains, and then we have 6 K1 over 8 K2 on the side hangs, and then on some days where we sell the back corners, we have 270 hangs, which is 12 K2 as well. So, and that's all powered by LA12X amps. For all that, we have, for the low frequency extension on that, we have 12 KS28 subs per side. And then we have another 12 on the ground, as well as the 4 KS28s on deck with the K2 side fills as well.
So why the K1s and the K2? Why the L-acoustics? Was that something you've always done, you're just comfortable with, or is that what the writer?
When we toured with Logic back in 2018, they had a K1, K2 system on that, and we immediately fell in love. We really got the opportunity to go check that out. We were actually in France for a tour in Europe, and we got to go see the factory, and just seeing the development and all the R&D they put into their systems was just incredible. I love the boxes, how they sound tonally. Every PA manufacturer, they kind of have their own sound to them. Yeah. And the L-acoustics boxes are very nice and punchy and warm, but you still get the nice high-end definition and clarity from everything you need to cut through. So it's definitely been my favorite choice of box. It's just hands down just super powerful and great sounding to me.
You even got a free hat with it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, represent. So
let me ask you this: how much weight you got hanging up there?
I think it's roughly about 10,000 pounds per side.
So total, that's
20,000 pounds, roughly. So it's a lot of weight per side. Obviously, this is not a full rig day. We're in a little bit of a smaller arena today, but it's quite a bit of weight hanging up there. So
okay.
But
all driven by an SD5.
Yes.
Now let me ask you this: did you start on analog or did you start on digital?
Actually, so growing up in the church, I did learn on analog at first initially, and then when I was a teenager, the first console I ever got to experience that was digital was an M7, a Yamaha M7 CL. So that was my first dive into digital. I was like 13 or 14 at the time, so I just couldn't believe the motorized faders and all. I was like, you can recall things. This is great. Oh, you have EQ and compression in every channel. Amazing.
Yep. When you started with the NF, did you start off with it? Digicode, or do you start with something else? Is this just personal preference? Why the Digicode SD5?
So when I first started with NF, I had actually been more on the Avid side of things. I'd been touring profiles with T-Pain, Really enjoyed using the profile, and it's just, everybody had them at that point. They're very accessible, very easy to use. You run the plugins on board as well. So I was very much drawn to the SXL when it came out. I used it for a tour, and we had that, and I think at SC48 Monitor World. And it works really well. And, I had a bunch of friends. I think I talked to Kenny Sellers from 21 Pilots, and, he had some things to say about the Digicode, and several other people as well, just raving about, how much you can program in them, and some of the redundancy already built into these, and just how solid and stable they are, not to mention how amazing they sound to you. They're a very transparent desk, and, if you get a good source, you can get a really good mix going between all of your good sources. So, the SXL is great. I still work on it occasionally, but as far as being able to program a desk for a show, especially one like this where it's very theatrical, I prefer the Digicode. So we started 2018, I think we did, that was the tour we did in Europe. The first tour we did in Europe, for that matter. We carried SD9s for that, and kind of went back and forth in Monitor World because it was such a change for some things on stage for NF, but ultimately I landed in Digicode for front of house and have been with it ever since 2018. So we've done SD9s, SD10s. SD10 has been the go-to for most of the tours, just for the price point. It's really affordable to carry, and also the footprint, but you can still do a lot with it. This is the first tour I've actually had 5 out with NF, so it's been really good. I like having the extra screens and meter bridges on the side, so it definitely is nice to see all that information very accessible on the top surface.
How much of the stock plugins are you using? Are you using any sort of wave stuff? Or are you using any sort of?
So most of what I'm doing is natively in the desk, within the channel strips and the buses. This tour I have brought back, not Waves necessarily. I'm using Waves plugins, but I'm using Live Professor, which is running on this machine here. You can see a couple Waves plugins open actually.
Could you explain the difference for people of the two?
So Waves, typically when you run a Waves rig, you have to have the hardware like a server, a Waves Extreme server, which is what I'd run in the past before. And people have their preferences. I feel like I was able to get what I needed to out of the desk with the options there that I had on board with the desk natively. I got bitten a couple times by Waves doing little things here and there. It's always a component of like, is it a network card or a Cat5 or is it the host? So like, it became a situation where I was like, this is a lot of rack space. It's not worth it for me to deal with these failures and also program a lot. So. To try to get around those failures, so if in case it ever went down during a show. So, I've kind of stepped away from Waves and running a ton of plugins live. I didn't run a ton to begin with, but I had enough to where if it went down, it could be very problematic. Now I just it's kind of minimal with Live Professor. I'm running Valhalla reverbs and, a couple Waves plugins here and there just for bus comps and whatnot, and still do the same thing for that because, host machines and stuff like that running plugins, you always have to have your backup plan. So I'm able to program the console to have a backup if I need to reinsert native processing if that side goes down. So
well, let's talk about all the Rupert Neve you have back there.
Absolutely.
You got a lot of Rupert Neve there.
Yes. So
a lot of hardware. Can you walk me through your hardware?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was really drawn to the Rupert Neve stuff. Actually, the tour we did, the Logic, their front of house engineer, Darcy Kahn, shout out Darcy, had been using the master bus processor, the Portico 2, and I was blown away by what that was able to do on his mix bus, his main mix bus, and he actually let me try that on the run. It's super nice. I mean, it's not normal to have to let an opener. And it was kind of cool, and it worked out really well because we were driving the PA through his desk. He had guest lines set up on his SD7, so they took my lines from the SD10 I had on that run straight in the desk, and he's like, "Hey, if you want to use the Portico 2 and try it out, I'm totally fine with that." And he ended up letting me use it, and I was like, I need one of these right now. I think I'd been using an Avalon 747 at the time for master bus compressor, and it's fine, it worked well, but when I heard this, I was just blown away by what it did. I mean, even just inserting it in the line, you can hear a difference. Use the master bus processor, the 5059. I take all my buses, and I'm bringing back in there for summing. 5059 has 2 outputs on it, so I actually use one side just for all of the instruments and drums that are coming through, and then the other side, the other stereo output, I use for all vocals and vocal effects and stuff. So I split it up, and then it comes back into the console together before it goes to the master bus. So
Smart.
And then my other 2 Rupert Neve pieces I've been using are the Shelford channel here. I use that on the NF's vocal, and then the 5045, which is like a PSE primary source enhancer. So it cleans up, kind of the same thing with the triggers on the drums for cleaning up just excess stage noise and whatnot. It's kind of doing the same thing for NF's vocal mic. So what it does is just, as long as he's not hitting that threshold, it kind of ducks everything and acts as a gate for his vocal mic when he's not actually rapping or singing into it. So
I see EL8 over there.
Yep. I got the distressor here from Empirical Labs, and I use that on his vocal chain. So this is all 3 of these are his vocal chain right here. So I use the pre on the Shelford, to get that nice. It's a really nice sounding pre. I love how it sounds. A lot of people go line in on these guys, but actually, even though it's already coming through the Digicode pre, I still run it through the Shelford pre just to get that nice drive from it. So it sounds really nice sounding preamp. A little bit of EQ, and then a touch of compression. It's just really when he hits it hard, it catches those really loud signals a lot of times. And then the silk saturation, the texture on the end there is really nice as well. And that for me, like, I adjust this quite a bit throughout the show, depending on if he's singing or rapping.
Yeah.
Because sometimes he gets very harsh on the mic, and that helps me smooth out some of that harshness. I'll go back and forth between red and blue mode. There's other parts of the set that are very busy, and I need his vocal to cut more, so I'll switch back over to red mode. It works really well. You have to be really careful with it, because I think it's technically like a form of distortion that they've kind of put into, but it's nice distortion. It works really well. It kind of brings out certain harmonics. So and then the 5045 is right in line after that to help clean up post that, and then the distressor is like I'm running it in opto mode, so it's like my go-to just vocal compressor. It works really well. So it's always touching and tickling a little bit, but it's kind of the same thing. Like if he really eats into the mic, which he will do sometimes, it'll catch that stuff as well. But it just smooths all of his vocals out, brings out all the low things, because he's very dynamic in his singing and rapping. So it helps bring up the low volume stuff, but also tames some of the peaks and whatnot, and just smooths everything out nicely. So so that's his vocal chain there. And then we have an Eventide Eclipse. I'm really just running one preset for that for a couple of songs that we have. There's a lot more singing in this set. And when I was going through getting the stems ready for the show, I noticed there was several songs that had used an H3000 just for some vocal widening. So that was something I added for this. I used that for a few songs where I'm using that effect on his voice to help just widen and thicken things up. And then some Bricasti M7 reverbs. Because why not?
Why not? I love that.
So,
why not?
I use this Bricasti here for, that one's for his vocal. I have I think a Hall set up on that. Let's see. Yeah, I have the Amsterdam Hall preset. I've been running with that, and I'll change decay times depending on the arena from day to day, or the environment just in general. Outside I'll drive these reverbs a lot harder if we are open air or something where we need to have those reverbs back. Arenas, I don't drive into them as hard, just because there's already a natural reverberance in the room. So try not to muddy up the mix with too much reverb. So I'm using this one as a vocal effects, and then the next one below I'm using as I think I have it. Oh, not that one. I'm using a percussion plate for drums, specifically for toms, and then I'm running a separate reverb for snares inside of Live Professor on Valhalla.
Okay. I want to ask you that. I don't think many people understand this. I would like you to explain this. Could you explain the importance and how time coding is a part of your show? Could you talk about the SR112, and can you talk about how that integrates into the different areas?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have, I believe, 6 of these in the rig, throughout the whole rig. So, we have our playback world that has one built into it. So what the SR112 does, or I call it a D-strip or destripalizer.
Okay.
We use it to basically reshape or regenerate time code. So what it does is, if there's any frames dropped or if it's not getting good signal, it'll basically kind of re-amplify in a sense or regenerate, reshape bad frames that might come through.
Okay.
And what we do is timecode fires everything in our show. So fires snapshots on consoles. It fires
So for people
all,
who don't even know what time coding is, what is it for the beginners? What
Oh
does that
yeah,
mean?
so time code is it's basically like a digital signal. It's audible, very audible. It sounds terrible. You don't want to ever hear time code. But what it does is it allows these clocks to read numbers, and what it does is it creates a timeline for the show that you can basically stamp cues to between different devices. So lighting will read time code, and they can have cues that are stamped to a certain number. So when it goes past that number, it'll fire that cue. So it's essentially creating a timeline for each song for us on the show. It allows us to run the shows very consistently and program everything to where everything is executed the same every single night.
So when playback hits play back there, the lights will be able to do it.
Yep.
Yep.
Exactly. Yeah. So.
Sorry, keep going with that.
So like you're saying, playback will fire. It'll fire, the snapshot for my next song. It'll start that. It'll start his next song. It'll start video. So videos all sync to that as well. So it allows us to just sync everything in the system together. In total, it fires audio consoles, lighting consoles, and video. And then we have lasers on this tour as well. So they have a D strip in each of their racks. So time code, if they're dropping frames, they'll know really quickly because it'll show on the display if there's an error. Actually, it's showing an input error right now just from where it dropped earlier. But what it does is it gives us that information in real time on a clock, so we can see that we're getting time code. And we also know it kind of gives us a peace of mind that everything's being reshaped and the consoles can read it correctly, because there's all kinds of different. It's kind of like sample rates and stuff. A little different from sample rate, but there's different frame rates you can run timecode at. So we run it at a 30 non-drop. So just basically 29.97. That's just the flavor we've always used for timecode. So it's worked really well for us. And the timecode's very important on this show. It's very, very critical piece right there.
So one of the things I've been asking the different people I've been doing the interviews with is advice for new engineers. One of the things I've seen, I'm sure you've seen this, is during COVID, a lot of the people who have been doing it for a while kind of hung their hats up. So there's a lot of new, young guns that are doing it, and they want to be sitting where you're at. What advice did you give them, or maybe even to yourself when you're starting off, to maybe be in your seat one day?
I would say always, absorb as much as you can, ask questions as much as you can. That's how I learn. I mean, thank God for YouTube. Like,
seriously.
I mean, seriously, like, I've learned so much from just finding videos from other engineers and stuff. Networking with people is very important. I had several mentors throughout touring that have taught me a lot of different things.
Liking and subscribing videos like this.
Yeah.
Channels like this.
Exactly. So, I think, being able to absorb information from others and learning that way is really important. Use your ears. Don't necessarily look at how things look. Game structure is important, but, if it sounds bad, what's the point? Like, I've always, we have all these tools. We have Smart and stuff to be able to look at the system, but, if it sounds off, it sounds off. Like, I'm going to trust my ears before I trust anything visually that's being fed back to me on a console or Smart or anywhere else. So I would say, trust your ears, getting a good source, and then absorbing from people that have been doing it for a while is probably the top 3 things you could do starting off as an engineer.
So there's a audio person watching this. They want to get into audio. They're sitting at home right now. What is the best way for them to get involved and to maybe be on tour? Because it's kind of tough to be on tour. How do you get on tour without being on tour? They don't want to hire you unless you've been on tour. So how do you? What's your recommendation? I know the path is different for everybody.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely. I was very fortunate growing up in the church with having the technology there to be able to do that. So that's one avenue of doing it. I've also, I've kind of explored all the different avenues because I've worked for stagehand companies, so I've gotten to just be a local stagehand on shows like this and loading in and just asking questions that way. Working for local production companies that, or vendors that support tours like this, even working in the shop, you can learn a lot. So, and those places, PRG supported this tour, shout out PRG. They're looking for tons of people to get in their shops and start helping out and even putting people on tour. And they're looking for young, hungry people that want to learn. I mean, young and old alike. Like, if you want to tour, they're looking for you. So just as long as you're going in with a good mindset and ready for some long work days, you can get into it. You just have to find those companies, and a lot of them are doing hiring seminars and stuff too. So you can look for those vendors like that. PRG is always looking. So I would say doing that, and probably local production companies is the best way you can get in on it pretty quickly.
Let me ask, so there is a lot of people that go into getting this thing ready to go for you to be able to sit here. Could you break down the different roles and the different positions that allow you to be able to mix here today? What are the people that have been coming and setting this up for you?
Yeah, so we have on our audio crew, we have folks from PRG that are our vendor crew, and they're the ones that make sure the PA goes up every day safely and goes to the right spot, is hanging at the right height and pointed in the right direction, and then also making sure it's all circuited right.
How many of those you got?
So we have Will Foley's our systems engineer. He's an amazing guy. I'm so happy to have him out here with me. And then we have our friends Dustin and JMO. They're our PA techs. Dustin will fly the right side of the PA, all of that you see on the right side, and then Dustin flies all the right side, and then JMO will fly all the left side. And then we have Taylor, who's our monitor tech. She's working with Murph, our monitor engineer, making sure that they get all the side fills in the right spot as well as all the wedges on deck.
Can you explain the difference between a system engineer and a PA tech?
Yeah, so a systems engineer essentially decides how the system's going to be deployed every day. What he'll do is he'll come into the room. A lot of times we already have CAD files of the rooms, or rooms that are already built out in the mapping software. We have prediction software. L-Acoustics has Sound Vision, which has been a really great tool for us, and it's actually what I designed all this PA in when we first went into looking at the tour. We use that to kind of predict how the SPL is going to be in the room and how we need to point the boxes and the line array, because it's all line array, so there's different angles throughout the whole array. Basically, what he'll do is come in the morning. If he doesn't have a file for the room yet, he'll draw one up pretty quickly, which is pretty amazing to watch. He's pretty quick at it. And then he'll find, the furthest point out and then the closest point that we need to cover. And essentially the software allows us to map that pretty quickly and give us a ballpark of angles we need, and then we kind of adjust it and make our adjustments wherever we need to get it to our preferences and liking.
Yeah.
And they deploy it. He'll give all the PA techs the angles that they need, and they basically execute all of the paperwork that he gives them to get all the PA in the air. So
I think a lot of people who attend concerts like this, first off, I don't even think they notice the PA, and if they do, I think they assume that it just shows up and sounds good. Granted, I know we do some EQing on here, but you and I know that's not the case. Could you explain the steps it takes to be able to make that thing sound good, not just here, but in different environments? Because it changes based upon heat, based upon the environment, based upon elevation. So
Yep.
what happens? What does Will do to be able to make that sound good?
So what he'll do every day is he'll do a load check on the whole system, make sure everything's patched properly, make sure everything's communicating properly, and then he'll run pink noise, which is essentially just a full spectrum sine wave in a sense. Well, I guess not really a sine wave, but it allows us to see all frequencies across the whole spectrum and see how it's being reproduced in the arena. And what we have is a reference mic that's out in the room, actually multiple reference mics. He places them all across the room and across the different elevations. And allows us
How
to
many
check.
does he have?
I believe he has 5 total, yeah.
Oh,
So
cool.
he has 4 wireless mics and the one wired mic here
cool.
in front of house.
Cool.
So he'll run that pink noise, see how each zone is feeling, because we can essentially tune different zones of the line arrays and making sure that it's consistent for every single person in the audience as much as possible. Obviously, you're going to have some room variables that make things a little different, but the goal is to get a consistent sound from front to back for everyone in the audience. So he'll run the pink noise, get everything lined up, looking nice and flat there across the spectrum, making sure no frequencies are jumping out. He says, some frequencies can be accentuated in certain arenas.
Yeah.
So some arenas feel brighter, some feel very low, mid, heavy. You deal with low end decay in a lot of these arenas, so you'll hear a bass note and then it trails off for 3 or 4 seconds. So kind of dealing with stuff like that, we're able to mitigate in the system tuning those weird inconsistencies from day to day. So it allows me to do the same thing here on the desk, especially with what I've programmed to where I'm not having to completely change how things feel. we can just change it on the system side there and get the PA to do what we need to in the room. So he'll run through pink noise, and then he has a couple of tuning songs that he knows really well. He'll listen to those 3 or 4 songs, and then I have a couple of songs I know really well. I'll listen to those 3 or 4 songs and just make sure everything's translating like I feel it like it should be, and just using my ears to see how it feels in the room. Same with Will, and yeah, that's how we approach that.
What's your go-to song?
I would say probably my most used song is IGY by Donald Fagen.
Really?
I always pick up, it's so funny, I always pick up these songs from other people throughout my touring career. I had picked that one up from a mentor that helped me out a long time ago in Fozzy, Ben Hammond. Shout out Ben Hammond. He had been using IGY, and I would sit there and listen to him and what he was doing with the PA every day and what he was listening for. And I was like, oh, that makes sense why you're using this song. And I just got used to hearing that song, so I started using it. I've been using it since I toured with him on that tour. That was probably 2013 or 2012. So, yeah, I that's probably my go-to song is, basically Steely Dan, but but Donald Fagen, IGY, the Nightfly album. So, yeah.
What is the best piece of advice you've got from a mentor of yours?
I would probably say, it kind of goes back to the whole thing of use your ears, not your eyes. Like, if it, who cares what it looks like?
Yeah.
I've had parametrics that look wild, and it's like, it shouldn't look like that. And, to an extent, you should check things if you're getting really crazy, but, I've had people that have been like, that parametric's wrong. That doesn't look right. It's like, yeah, but does it sound good? Like, and, that's all subjective too. So, I would say doing that, and then also, a lot of people don't focus on it enough, but time alignment on things. Time alignment is very important for phase coherence, especially with drums. I spend a lot of time, I'll actually measure drum mics and stuff like that with overheads and whatnot to make sure, and using delay time on channels and groups to make sure everything is aligning well. So I spend a lot of time trying to make sure I'm time aligned well, and same with the system too. Like, we time align the system. That's also part of the process of tuning the system, is making sure that everything is nice and time aligned. So.
Okay. Future of sound. Is there anything that you see coming that you're excited about? Are you thinking there's going to be, I keep mentioning this, but do you think Atmos is a real thing in the touring environment? But is there anything that you see that's like, that you're really excited to come down the pipeline?
I think there's
going to be just one screen,
yeah, exactly.
like the Waves Live.
And all touchscreen.
Yes.
Please don't. Yeah, I think L-Acoustics, they have their new L2 series box that's coming out, or it's already come out at this point. People are touring it. I think Dream Theater just had it on the road. There's really exciting things with that because, what manufacturers are doing now are getting things into smaller formats that are more feasible to tour in these, the traditional left-right thing is, I think, will eventually become a thing of the past. You see systems like Elisa from L-Acoustics that's a immersive environment. I think we're going to see more immersive shows with sound, kind of like Dolby Atmos is doing with, like the spatial songs and stuff on iTunes and whatnot, where you can, it feels like you're sitting in a room and things are all around you. These engineers and all the folks doing research and development have, it's incredible what they've done, being able to do that and kind of get that same experience for every person across the room. So I think the immersive thing is going to grow more and more, especially, with the L2 and stuff, making it more feasible to fly multiple arrays across the room and do it affordably, and also with less amplification, and just getting as much out of the system with a smaller box too. So,
do you have any tips or any secret sauce that you use that you'd be willing to share with us that is a signature of you?
I'll say I rely heavily on the back end of the MVP, the Master Bus Processor from Rupert Neve. The SFE, which I believe is Stereo Field Editor, is the acronym. It is amazing, like what it can do to a mix. It does something with mid sides. And you have width and depth. So I use the depth very much so on low frequencies. I set it to the low frequency band and insert that EQ there. The width is, it just really opens up everything in the mix. It allows everything to sit in a certain spot. And I don't really adjust these a whole lot during the show, but occasionally I will, especially the width. if I'm trying to get things to sit right in the room, if it feels like it's too tight together, I'll use that width to spread things out a bit more,
Yeah.
and just it kind of gives everything its own place. But it's magical what it's doing. I can't quite explain what it's doing, but the way I'll approach it is I'll start at 0 a lot of times during the day, and I'll roll into the setting to see what I like. I'm like, oh, that's it, and it kind of changes day to day with the room. Same with like the texture modes and whatnot, between the red and blue silk texture modes. But you know, something about the Master Bus processor it's got something magical going on about it. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. One of the things I want to ask you about, and I don't think it's talked about enough, is the balance between work life and personal life. You're married.
Yes.
You've got kids.
Yes.
That's tough being on the road a lot. How do you balance that, and how do you find success with that? Or if there's people that are watching this that are struggling with that, or people who want to get into it, you kind of need to go in with an open mind that you're going to be gone, and concerts happen on weekends and on holidays. So how have you found success with that?
God bless my wife for putting up with it, first of all. I met her when I was on the road, and so she's always known me as a touring person, so I've never really been home except for COVID, which is, it was very hard on the industry, but it was kind of a blessing in itself to be home for that period of time, especially having my youngest one. But I would say communication is important. There's so many avenues of communication now, like FaceTime. I FaceTime my kids as much as possible, and my wife as much as possible while I'm on the road. So it's not the same as being in person, but even if they're asleep, I'll make videos for them occasionally and send them videos. Let them know, hey, I'm still thinking about you. Like I'm here. Now my wife has come home from work, and she'll travel out to shows as well. I'm bringing the kids, so that's really nice as well. I would say communication is really important, especially in a relationship. Being married, we have. I read this out of an article from one of the production magazines talking about entry and exit patterns. So we're very intentional about our time together when I'm about to leave for a tour, and then same thing coming back home from a tour. So when I leave, I try to make sure she's set up for success. And it kind of goes both ways. She knows I'm very busy and getting ready for a lot of strenuous days, and there's going to be long days involved going into a tour. So we're definitely mindful about that. And then just as important, entry plan, when I come back home, she's got her routine and her rhythm that she's got going. It's very important I don't come in and just throw all of that out of whack, especially with kids being in school and stuff like that.
Very smart.
So we're very intentional with that time and the way we spend it, and also just work together. So try to make sure that I'm not coming in and shifting everything after being gone for months at a time. So I would say probably communication is the biggest thing, and just staying in touch. So it's very important.
I know you're a busy guy. Thank you so much. If people want to follow you on social media and follow your adventures, where can they find you?
Yeah, they can find me Instagram. I have Trav_Daddy92. Dad mode. So they can find me that way. I'm not on social media a whole lot, but I do occasionally post and the adventures we're getting into. So out on the road. So you can find me there, or
an NF show near you.
An NF show near you. So,
well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Nick. It was a pleasure having you out here.
Thank you.